Warning, the following video contains spoilers. If you don't want this episode spoiled for you, switch the video off now.
The Timeshift.
For those of you playing along at home, yes, my camera still isn't working, I'm getting a new one. But for the time being, let's just do this all audio, baby, yeah! So here we are today to talk about Spyfall 2, Spyfall the Squeakquel. But before I get into my opinions of it, I want to know what you thought, dear listener. Did you love this episode, Doctor Who? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves, or towards the end of a future video. And be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube's a very scary place these days for small content creators. With all that out the way, let us discuss Spyfall 2 Spy Harder. Look, last week I said that it was going to be very important that this episode was able to stick the landing. And I am pleased to say that this episode did stick the landing, more or less. Look, towards the end of this episode, it did certainly feel as though it stumbled for my liking. You may feel differently, but for me, yeah, it was almost there. It almost did it. And if I am to be brutally honest, I don't think this episode is anywhere near as good as the episode prior to it. It frankly isn't. It doesn't have many of the same impacts and moments that the last one did. But still, what we got was fine in and of itself. It gets the pass from me. Whilst I'm sure I'll be corrected on this by someone in the comment section, it certainly felt that most of this episode was more set up for the storyline that we're going to have this series, the great series-long mystery, rather than actually dealing with the present threat of Vor and those glory aliens. I certainly hope that this is leading up to a series-long mystery, and it's not going to be like the Timeless Child stuff from last series where they only mention it for one episode and then never mention it again for another series. I mean, I hope it's not going to be like that. I hope that this series ends with us finding out about the Timeless Child or something like that, or at least setting it up so we can find out about it in the Christmas special or whatever. But as for this particular episode, yeah, it felt like it was more about that stuff than it actually was about the whole Vor. I think Vor's a stupid name as well. It has bad internet connotations, which we won't get into, but you know, that kind of stuff felt very sidelined, very, very sidelined. Last week we had this really great spy romp. We have globetrotting, disguises, exotic locations, gadgets, car chases. This week, for want of a better phrase, it felt very typically Doctor Who, with lots of running, quick location changes, and many, many hefty exposition dumps. All in all, making it feel like a very Russell T Davies experience. Make of that what you will. All this together, much like the Vor stuff and the secret agent stuff being sidelined, the companions themselves felt thoroughly sidelined. I'll get to the companions and the performances in the performance section, but what I can certainly say here and now, the gags that they did with them felt often like they were undercutting and undoing the drama. I mean, the whole bit with Graham with the "oh, don't make me do the soft shoe shuffle," I really didn't like at all. I mean, well, I'll discuss that in the performance section when we get to it. And of course, the big issue with this episode, beyond the big Gallifrey gets bloated up bit, is the fact the Master was defeated by the Doctor doing something very, very clever off screen. Yeah, sorry. No, you're not having that. You're not having the big conclusion of a two-part to be something that's solved off screen without us seeing it. Sorry, you ain't doing that. I mean, they couldn't even just do a quick montage of her doing the thing as she was explaining. I mean, they did that to explain how she got the secret message to them on the plane to help them land the bloody thing, but you couldn't do it to explain how the Master's spinny, twirly robot thing got rigged up. You couldn't do that. I mean, it'll just ends up making for, I hate to say it, some really prime A-grade Deus Ex Machina if ever there was one. The kind of Deus Ex Machina that even makes H.G. Wells blush. I mean, they could have really just cut the scene with Barton and his mum for what little good that actually did for the story itself, and just have a scene with the Doctor rigging the statue with Lovelace and Nador, or whatever her name is, I'm sorry, I can't remember her name, just there rigging the statue, and the Doctor giving her psycho babble, her science babble, and going,
Oh, if I just put this, there, that'll do it. Now, this device, if it works properly, it will end up sending all the Kashin, or whatever the names are, back to their home dimension. All we have to make sure is that the Master activates it at exactly the right moment, and then when it reaches peak efficiency, poof, they'll end up going.
Then you have Lovelace asking,
Are you sure this is going to work, Doctor? I mean, this feels like it could be a bit of a gamble. You've said it yourself. You're not entirely sure where these creatures come from. And the
Doctor will just turn and say,
oh yeah, I'm sure it'll definitely work. Definitely, probably, mostly 90 to 50% sure it'll work. I'm sure it'll be okay. It'll be okay. It'll probably be alright.
just have a fun little scene of them fixing and rigging up the machine so it's set up later. And you suggest that maybe it won't work. And then when it doesn't work, as it didn't work in this actual ending, it then makes a horrifying moment for all the fans at home, thinking something bad's going to happen. But then the Doctor does the thing of,
Ha ha! Mr. Glowy Alien People, the Master was being an arsehole to you all along. Take him away, boys!
you know, you can still have more or less the same story, just have a scene with the Doctor setting this up. And it would have worked perfectly well. But they didn't. With that said, let us discuss something else. Something that may be a little bit of a bitter pill to swallow. Some more bad news. Let us discuss the performances. Okay, so the performance section where I discuss the performances and the performances of our cast of characters. As I said previously, I feel as though the companions were really sidelined in this episode. They were barely in it. So it's kind of hard to talk about the performances when you didn't see much of them. Much like last week, Ryan and Yaz were fine. Bradley Walsh, Graham, whilst he was better than last week, he still feels a little bit AFK. Though again, that might be just indicative of being sidelined. The really odd moment for me with the companions came towards the end of the episode. While they were all just stood there in the TARDIS, stood there like they were posing for a photograph on some kind of Doctor Who exhibit like a bunch of tourists. I mean, couldn't they have had something to do, some small busy work? Mucking about on their phone, or eating a cream cracker, or polishing something? That would at least give them something to do, but they're all just stood there like they're posing for an album cover, for goodness sake. As for the guy playing the Master, who again, his name escapes me, I think he's fine. I think he does the job well. I'm really not so keen on him being manic, but I'll take that over the I'm crazy thing that we had with John Sims' Master. I just don't understand why modern Doctor Who feels as though the Master should be some kind of mad agent of chaos, when that's not what he is. He's the Master because he wants to be in control of things. He wants to be the dominant force. He wants to be in charge. He wants to rule the universe, not blow it up. If you want a character that wants to blow up the universe and do random shit for the sake of it, just bring back the meddling monk, and then you have the same effect to it. Or is that too much of a deep cut for the fans? I don't know. When he's at his best, this particular incarnation of the Master, it's when he is in control, when he is being sinister. Like his kneel before Zod moment. Stuff like that is actually really threatening and sinister and creepy. The stuff where he's gurning and barking, yeah, no, sorry, I don't like that stuff. I don't like it at all. Lenny Henry as Barton was great again, even though, like most Chibnall-era villains, he got away in the end. And his speech that he gave in front of all the tech people... Yeah, I'm in two minds about that. I mean, on the one hand, it was wonderfully sinister in that way that cheesy bad guy villain speeches should be, but at the same time I get this deep feeling that Chibnall should be stood behind me, whacking me over the head with a TV Times or something, shouting at me, "Do you get the message? Social media, it's evil?" Which is kind of a hard thing for them really to take the moral high ground on, bearing in mind Doctor Who has Christ knows how many different social media accounts on the internet, but whatever, won't let that stand in the way of a good moral message. Jodie Whittaker's performance as the Doctor is the best in her time as being the Doctor. It finally feels as though she's getting some depth that her particular incarnation of the Doctor desperately needed. I'm not entirely keen on the idea of her angsty distantness coming from the destruction of Gallifrey, and I'll discuss that in a moment, but, you know, I think that she always needed something. She needed some kind of darker element or edge to her. As much as I may not like that in modern Doctor Who, I'll take that, because it actually gives her a little bit more weight and gravitas to her character, and it means Jodie Whittaker gets an opportunity to actually act. Though, with that all said, performance-wise, she was a fantastic entity. She really did the duty, and it's really, really great to see her finally doing something significant and substantial. with all that said, let us now get into the overview and my overall thoughts and feelings of this episode. Okay, so now the overview. What did I think about the episode as a whole? And as a whole, I think that it was good. Perfectly fine. It gets the pass from me. Even if I don't think it's as good as the previous episode, I certainly think this is an episode that is fine in and of itself. I don't think that it has anything within it that is quite of the same level of impact of discovering that O was actually the Master. I think that it lacks that kind of an impact for me, even though we had something big that I'll discuss in just a moment. That's not to say this episode was not totally without lacking in impact, or was without emotional stakes or anything like that. It did certainly have them, just not to quite the level that I wished it had done. So, good job, Mr. Chibnall. You kind of stuck the landing, even if you did stumble a little bit towards the end of it. Now, with all that said, let us address the elephant in the room here, and that being the destruction of Gallifrey, and seemingly the destruction of the Time Lords. Can I just say I don't care? I know people are going to get upset by that, but I just have to be blunt with you. I don't care. I really don't, because we've been here before. We've had Gallifrey get destroyed and the Time Lords seemingly exterminated. And not too long ago, certainly in the Moffat era, we had storylines that hinted to some kind of greater recontextualization and shaking up of the quote-unquote lore, but in both instances, that stuff never worked for me. Never in a million years did that stuff ever work for me. I was never fond of the idea of the Time War and the apparent destruction of the Time Lords the first time around, if I'm being perfectly honest with you. It always felt very 2000s in its approach to giving our protagonist a dark backstory, one that I felt was never ever needed for Doctor Who. And to that end, I was never really keen on the 50th anniversary. Even with all my misgivings around the Time War, the whole idea of wrapping all that stuff up so neatly and presenting the apparent destruction of the Doctor's race as being little more than a sitcom-level misunderstanding undercut whatever dramatic significance that had come before it for my liking. Sure, I may not have liked the Time War, but if we're going to have it, let's have it. Let's not just have it waved off as, oh yeah, he actually didn't kill them all, and whoopsie-daisy, he kind of forgot, whoopsie-doodle. Now, to be honest with you, I could talk all day about how much I dislike the Time War and the 50th anniversary, but that's not the point of this video, and I do know that we're starting to get towards the end of it, so I'll just wrap it up in saying that, yeah, I don't like that stuff, I really do not, because this is either going to amount to something that is going to, I hate to say it, be law-breaking, or it's going to be a great big nothing burger, and I worry that it's going to be a great big nothing burger more than it is actually going to do something big and impactful. As, no offence to the man, but I just don't think this is the kind of storyline that Chris Chibnall may be cut out to tell. He's not really proved himself as being able to work with such large-scale lore. The only writer and showrunner I think that's been able to prove that thus far has been Russell T Davies, but, you know, not to get into a whole lot of discussion, I think they had a far easier job than Moffat or Chibnall ever really did. I understand that people are going to start shaking their fists at me when I say this, but I think at the end of the day, people just need to calm down about the lore and about stuff like Missy's redemption arc and that kind of stuff, because at the end of the day, and I don't want to sound like someone who's doing a no true Scotsman thing or a no true Than kind of thing, but the truth of the matter is that stuff like that lore, backstory, past storylines, it very rarely matters in Doctor Who. Doctor Who has never been a big show for lore. The first story that I saw of Doctor Who featured the Master getting disintegrated in a volcano. Stone dead, gone forever. Then a few stories later he was brought back. How? Lorani did it. How did she bring him back? Never explained, she just did it. Remember a few series ago where the Master was pulled into another dimension? How did he get out of it? Never explained, just did it. So with that in mind, when people say, well, how's this Master coming to be? Because the old Master said that he killed the new Missy because he used the full blast of his sonic. So that means she's dead forever, she can't possibly come back. So that must mean that this is a pre-Missy Master. Yeah, it doesn't. It really doesn't, because if the Master can be brought back from full-on disintegration, can be brought back from being killed by the Daleks, can be brought back from goodness knows how many gruesome deaths over the years, they can certainly be brought back after being supposedly killed off by a previous incarnation of them. Let us not get that twisted. And yes, I understand for people who liked Missy's redemption arc, that's going to be hard to hear. That's going to be hard to hear that at the end of the day, that whole storyline ultimately amounted to nothing. If we're being brutally honest, it was always going to amount to nothing. Because if Chris Chibnall or any future writer observed the whole Missy/Master redemption arc, then the Master would never return to Doctor Who. They were never going to do a previous incarnation of the Master, some kind of pre-Delgado incarnation. Certainly not in the main series. I know they've done it in the audio books, but they're not going to do it in the main series. Mostly due to the fact that it would result in the writers being, in some ways, hamstrung. Because they're not going to be able to really explore the character and do some crazy, wild stuff, because they might end up doing something that might be law-breaking. So they might as well just keep going and keep being bold and innovating and reinventing and doing new things with the character, rather than just going back on old territory that at the end of the day it has to end up ending quite neatly so we get them regenerating to Delgado at a future point. That's not to say we'll never see an older incarnation of the Master, it's just that, well, it kind of feels like a lot of work to do just for the sake of bringing back a monster, a character that's been brought back with so many bullshit reasons in the past, you know? I'd hate to be dismissive of you, at the end of the day, this is Doctor Who, the laws never really mattered. It only really mattered when Stephen Moffat took in charge, because Doctor Who exists from a weird time when law didn't matter, when continuity often didn't matter with programs like this. So getting upset about it, I don't want to sound like an arsehole, but it kind of feels like much ado about nothing to me. But what did you think, dear listener? Did you like this episode of Doctor Who? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll get back to you shortly, either directly in the comments themselves or towards the end of next week's video where you'll be featuring some kind of montage. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTube stuff that YouTube wants you to do, because YouTube is very, very scary these days. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.